Peter stepped closer to Jesus, his voice low but urgent. "Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 7 times." It seemed generous, more than the rabbis required. But Jesus looked at him with eyes that held eternity. "I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times." The disciples exchanged glances. This was impossible. So Jesus began a story that would shatter their understanding of mercy forever. The kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. Jesus painted a scene of royal authority. This king wasn't cruel. He was just. As the audit began, a man was brought before him who owed 10,000 talents, a debt so astronomical it equaled millions of dollars today. It was a sum no one could repay in 1,000 lifetimes. The servant stood trembling, knowing his fate was sealed. The king's decree was swift and devastating. Since the servant couldn't pay, he ordered that the man, his wife, his children, and everything he owned be sold to repay the debt. In that culture, this meant utter ruin, a family shattered, a life erased. The servant fell to his knees, his forehead touching the cold stone floor. Desperation choked his voice as he begged, "Be patient with me, and I will pay back everything." It was a foolish promise. He could never repay such a debt. But something stirred in the king's heart. He looked at the broken man before him, not just a debtor, but a human soul. The king's anger melted into pity. With a wave of his hand, he did the unthinkable. "I cancel your debt. You are free." The servant gasped. The chains of his obligation fell away. He walked out of that throne room, owing nothing. But the story didn't end there. That same servant, still feeling the warmth of mercy, went out and found a fellow servant who owed him 100 denarii, a few months' wages. It was a real debt, but a speck compared to the ocean, just forgiven. The forgiven servant grabbed the man by the throat and began to choke him. "Pay back what you owe me," he demanded, his face twisted with rage. The fellow servant fell to his knees, using almost the exact same words. "Be patient with me, and I will pay you back." The plea echoed the scene in the throne room. But this time there was no mercy. The forgiven servant refused. He had the man thrown into debtor's prison until the debt was paid. The clang of the cell door echoed through the courtyard, a sound of utter hypocrisy. Other servants watched this unfold, their hearts burning with indignation. They had seen the king's incredible mercy. How could this man be so cruel? They went and reported everything to the king. The king's face grew dark as he listened. The same compassion that had freed the servant now turned to righteous anger. He summoned the unforgiving servant back to the throne room. The servant stood once more before the throne, but the atmosphere had changed. The king's voice cut like a blade. "You wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you begged me. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant, just as I had on you?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable. The servant's mouth opened, but no words came. He had no defense. Then came the devastating sentence. In his anger, the king handed the servant over to the jailers to be tortured until he could pay back all he owed. And since the debt was impossible, the torture would never end. Jesus paused, letting the weight of the story settle. The disciples understood. This wasn't just about money. It was about the heart's posture before God. Jesus then spoke the chilling application. "This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart." Not just lip service, not just outward compliance, but a deep, heart-level release. The kingdom of heaven operates on the principle of received mercy becoming extended mercy. To withhold forgiveness is to reject the very grace that saved us. The disciples sat in stunned silence. Peter, who had asked the question, now saw forgiveness not as a math problem, but as a way of life. The parable exposed the ugliness of a heart that receives grace but gives none. It revealed that unforgiveness is a prison we build for ourselves, and the key is always within our grasp, if we will only remember the cross, where our own infinite debt was paid. So the question echoes down to us today. Who do you need to forgive? not because they deserve it, but because you have been forgiven so much more. The King's mercy is yours, freely given. Will you let it flow through you? As you ponder this, consider the freedom that awaits. If this story stirred your heart, please subscribe and share this video. Together, let's echo the covenant of grace. What did this story teach you? Share your answer below. Subscribe to Echoes of the Covenant for another timeless story of faith.